Good morning, Milwaukie Lutheran, and welcome to worship this morning. And hope you're all staying warm and surviving the snowy weather and the crazy temperatures. We're doing okay. Our poor furnace with our uninsulated house is keeping us at a nice balmy 65. So, yay! We've got the windows all zipped up and everything is as best as we can get it. But even so, we're utilizing layers. So I hope everybody's doing well. I would just remind everybody as well to keep in mind that we've got a lot of vulnerable people that are outside right now, and this is very dangerous weather. So if you could pray for all of our unhoused folks, that everybody is able to find shelter and all that, that would be great. So, all right, let's get into it. This is actually my second time recording this. I was about 95% of the way through, and our power cut out. And it came right back on, but I still lost the video. So, yay. Love that. Anyways, okay. We are in the Gospel of John today, John chapter 1, specifically verses 43 to 51. So if you want to follow along while I'm reading or just follow along while I'm preaching, feel free to open up your Bibles. So again, John chapter 1, 43 to 51. All right. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Okay, this might be a familiar text to you, especially if you've been attending Milwaukie Lutheran for a while. This is one of my favorite texts because of the way in which the Gospel of John, the author of John, plays with the verbs in Greek to see, right? So this might be a old hat to some of you. For those of you that haven't heard this, I hope I'm doing it justice. I'm going to give you a truncated version, but essentially in Greek, well, in the Gospel of John, there are three main verbs that are used for the concept of sight, to see. And they are blepomai, optanomai, and horao. And horao has an aorist version. Aorist is one of the tenses in Greek. It's kind of like a past perfect tense, sort of, and that's ide. Okay, so I saw you under the fig tree. And what's significant about these three verbs is optanomai and blepomai can be used. I mean, they can all be used interchangeably, sort of, but horao or ide carries with it this extra sense of to know. And we've talked about this before, and essentially what that means is when John uses ide, and he uses it intentionally, and the gospel author, he is indicating that it's more than just the physical act of observing. There is a comprehension, a knowing in the seeing that is occurring, right? And so if you track throughout the Gospel of John, you will see John using horao or ide regularly, and it's often Jesus who is doing the seeing. What it's indicating is that there is more than just observation. There is almost interaction, comprehension, a knowing that's going on there. And in fact, you can translate horao or ide in either direction. It can either be to see or to know. It's used in both ways in John and elsewhere in the New Testament. So, when in this text we have these different forms of to see that are being used. Keep in mind that John's hopping back and forth between using those words, and especially when Jesus says you will see greater things than these, he's using ide. He's saying you're going to know, you're going to experience, you're going to comprehend greater things than these. Okay, let me tell you a story real quick. So I might have mentioned her before, but we have a neighbor named Mary, and Mary and Michael live four houses up the streets from us. Mary was one of the first people that we met in moving into this house. We moved in here in March of 2020, just before COVID hit. And as you probably remember, it was hard to see people and meet people, especially in a new neighborhood during the beginning of COVID because we were all indoors. And so the people that we did meet off the bat were people that were outside a lot, namely the people that walked or ran or biked or jogged, right? Mary walked a lot, and so Mary was a person we encountered right away. And I think I was probably working in the yard, and Mary walked by, and we made introductions, et cetera, et cetera. And Alen probably met her in the same manner. I think I saw Mary again maybe a couple of weeks later. She'd forgotten my name, which was actually comforting to me because I'm a face person, not necessarily a name person. I remember faces very well, but I often forget the name that is attached to them. So it drives Alen nuts sometimes because I'll see somebody and I'll be like, I know them. I don't know how I know them. I don't remember their name. I don't remember the context in which I know them, but I know them. And sometimes it's somebody that I have actually met. Sometimes it's somebody that I've seen on TV or something like that, So I was not disturbed that Mary didn't remember my name. And I probably told her my name a couple more times after that. Normal thing. Where we first got the sense that something was a little off was actually when we got our first dog, Madeline. And of course, getting a new puppy, we were doing a lot of walking around the neighborhood and meeting people. Madeline loves to meet people, and so she met Mary, and Mary asked all the normal dog things, what's her breed, how old is she, where did you get her from? And then we met Mary a second time with Madeline, and she asked the same questions, and obviously did not remember having met Madeline. And so it was only maybe a couple of weeks later that her husband Michael was walking by, and I, struck up conversation with him, and he let me know that Mary had been diagnosed with dementia, with Alzheimer's. And we watched that disease progress with Mary over the course of the next 3 years. Mary continued to walk a lot, although her area which she covered kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we would notice that sometimes Mary would get to an intersection and wouldn't know where she was at and would get confused and would sometimes just stand there for a while looking around. And there were many times in which neighbors would walk Mary back to her house. And then Mary wouldn't be walking without Michael. They would walk together after that. And then finally, about a year ago, we stopped seeing Mary pretty much altogether. And we later found out that she has been going to essentially an adult care facility during the day. Well, last Sunday, after I got home from church, I had worked out and I was getting into the shower, and Alen knocked on the door and said, Mary's missing. The neighbors are getting together to go look for her. So I showered, went outside, and as soon as I got outside, one of our neighbors, Jay, drove down and said to us, good news, Mary's been found. Kind of gave us the details. She was surprisingly far away, but it had been a couple of hours. But somebody, saw her, called the police. We woke up the next morning finding out that Mary had left in the middle of the night. Michael was in the process of installing new security, hadn't had an opportunity to do it yet, and she left sometime between 11:30 and 4:30 a.m., which is when he woke up and found that she had walked out. We rallied the neighborhood again. He called the police, and you can imagine how this goes, right? So we organized our neighborhood into volunteer groups. We were basically just driving and walking around every street that we could possibly find, letting people know that Mary was missing. Search and rescue came in. They brought the dogs. They organized more volunteers. Monday evening, we had about 100 high school kids who are search and rescue volunteers that came with backpacks and hiking clothes and went down in every single ravine and gully, through every trail and forest nearby looking for Mary. As of 10 o'clock Monday night, we hadn't found her yet. We'd heard rumors that somebody had seen her and posted it on social media, but Tuesday morning when we woke up, that was later debunked, that was not her. So we essentially started Tuesday morning from scratch. And there were two things that I heard in our gathering of our neighbors on Tuesday morning that struck me. The first, which proved to be very prescient, was the caretaker at the facility that Mary goes to spoke up during our morning organization meeting and said, she hasn't gone far. She is not, she's not far away from the house. She has holed up somewhere. If you remember, the weather was awful. It was like 40 degrees and raining, which we were terrified, right? That, a person can't be outdoors in that and survive. And she said she hasn't gone far, which proved to be prescient because she, in fact, was found about an hour later, 2 blocks from where we were at. There was a house that was under construction, and she went in through an open door and curled up in the bathtub. And when the workers came in on Tuesday morning, that's where they found her, and thankfully, called the police and got her on an ambulance, treatment for hypothermia, and she's okay. So good news there. Mary is home and back to her normal self. She's doing well. So obviously want to say a huge thank you to Multnomah County Search and Rescue, to all the volunteers that participated. The other thing that I heard that really stuck with me, it was something that we were all saying to each other at that time, which is, people aren't going to notice her because they're going to think she's homeless. And I invite you to sit with that for a second and think about what that means, both with regards to Mary, but also with regards to our houseless population, of which between Multnomah and Clackamas counties, we have over 8,000 people right now that are unhoused. And what does it mean that we've essentially trained ourselves not to see folks, right? And again, I'm not trying to make us feel bad. I just want us to think about the ways in which we do close our eyes. We train ourselves not to see people. And to be fair, it's stuff that's hard to look at, right? It's hard to look at people that are sleeping outdoors, that are, experiencing mental health issues and substance abuse. But I want you to think about what it means to stop seeing people as people. And this is really important because we go back to our story from the Gospel of John and the Gospels in general. And one of the things that we often think about, when Jesus invites people to come and see, to come and follow him, we often think about it in terms of the miracles, the great works that he is doing. Like, for example, the great works that he speaks about in this text from John, that what Jesus is inviting his disciples to see and other people to see is the amazing things that he does, which is true. That's absolutely what Jesus is inviting people to do. But one of the remarkable things is that if you look at the things that Jesus does, more often than not, he heals people. But if you look at the people that Jesus encounters across all the Gospels, the Synoptics and the Gospel of John included, the people that he encounters and heals are the people that we ignore, the people that we have trained ourselves not to see. So, think about it, right? The Syrophoenician woman, the Samaritan woman, the woman at the well, the Gerasene demoniac, the man at the pool of Siloam, the man who is paralyzed, the lepers. These are all people that in Jesus's time were folks that polite society had turned their gaze from, had trained themselves not to see. Because with the exception of the Gerasene demoniac, these are people who live in and amongst the people, right? But they are the sick, the ostracized, the marginalized. We use that term a lot, but I want you to think about what it means in this context, especially, the man by the pool of Siloam. He's in and amongst the city. He's in and amongst the rest of the people, and yet here he sits alone in his affliction. And so the people that Jesus encounters, the people that Jesus goes to heal, goes to spend time with, are the people that we have taught ourselves to ignore. Can just let the import of that sink into you, Who Jesus calls us to follow him for, who Jesus calls us to see, are the people that make us uncomfortable in a lot of ways, the people that we have perhaps thought of as lost causes, the people that we, and to use our modern context, perhaps in some way think brought the scenario upon themselves. And yet these are the very people that Jesus draws our gaze to. Because I would like you to think about this text from that regard. Look at the exchange between Nathanael and Jesus. It's actually, pretty hilarious if you look at it. Because Nathanael himself is ready to dismiss Jesus. He's ready to not see Jesus. Philip comes to him and says, I found him. I found the dude. I found the Messiah. Who is he? Well, he's Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth. And Nathanael's response is, well, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And he's not really joking. I mean, the one thing I wish I could, gain access to the context of that. Like, what was it about Nazareth? Was it because it was like a rural town, or is it because of its proximity to Caesarea? What made Nathanael, make that statement? In the same way that we would say, well, can anything good come out of Michigan or Florida or whatever, your bias is? And so when Nathanael finally approaches Jesus after Philip has said to him, come and see, the first thing Jesus remarks upon is, here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. In the same way that you would say, here's somebody that speaks what's on their mind, where you're like, well, it's not really a compliment, but we're saying something obvious. And again, just look at that statement. He's essentially saying, as if he heard Nathanael say, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Jesus is essentially saying, well, at least he's blunt. There's no deceit in this guy. He's not gonna tell you a falsehood to make you feel better. But then in the interaction between the two, Jesus says to Nathanael, I saw you under the fig tree. I ided you under the fig tree. I knew you. I understood you. I comprehended you. Which then prompts Nathanael in his remark of, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. That there's something in seeing that is more than just observing, it's comprehending. So the question that I invite us to consider today is, what does it mean that Jesus invites us to ide, to horao, to see people, right? Especially the people in the Gospels that he calls his disciples to follow him in seeing, right? Again, go through your list of folks, the stories in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John of the Syrophoenician woman, the Samaritan, all of these folks that have been not even ignored, just we've forgotten that they exist because their existence is an inconvenience. They're the unhealed, the unclean, the marginalized, the ostracized. And what does it mean for us now in 2024? Got to remember we're in a new year, that Jesus calls us to see those folks. What does it mean that Jesus calls us to see the people that we avert our gazes from? And see, not just in the sense of observation, because we're really good at that, right? Almost like, the Wild America by Marty Stouffer. We like to watch, but we don't want to get involved. But what does it mean that he calls us to ide, to know, to comprehend, and to see from the sense of how we use that word in English? I see you, not just in the sense of like I'm observing you, but I'm paying attention to you, right? I am seeking to understand and empathize. So what does it mean that Jesus calls us to see people? And I would even invite you to consider, rereading the gospel from that perspective, that in the Gospel of John, Jesus isn't calling people to see his amazing works. He's calling people to see the people that he sees, to see and understand and acknowledge the folks that he goes and heals and spends time with. And I want to end, on a sense of good news. First thing, a little bit of a tangent. I just want to again reiterate a huge message of gratitude to everybody that participated in looking for a neighbor. It was a very very profound experience. And in particular, we have two neighbors, Jay and Garrison, wonderful guys. They've been married for 30 odd years, both from Texas. They moved to San Francisco to get married and have graced our neighborhood since long before we've been here. They single-handedly organized the volunteer response. They opened up their house to all of these hundreds of volunteers. They opened up their bathroom. They set out a tent. They bought food, snacks, power bars, Gatorade. Many a volunteer remarked to us, this is the best search and rescue gig we've ever had, specifically because of these two guys. And you know, I don't think it would come as a shock to you to tell you that Jay and Garrison don't go to church, considering the background that they come from. But I will say they are two of the most Christ-like men I've ever met. And so I want to make sure to acknowledge that they were essentially the heart of this effort. And it, you know, was really an honor to be able to work with them. But I also want to name, you know, kind of the powerful thing in witnessing something like this, which is that Mary is a person with memory loss, a person with dementia. And I'm sure there are many of you who have or have had the experience of caring for a friend or a family member who has gone through this journey that is so hard and so awful. And in many ways, I think that folks with dementia and folks with Alzheimer's and other, you know, forms of memory loss, we often avert our gaze from in the same way that we do our houseless neighbors, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable a lot of times to be with somebody who can't remember who they were talking to, or remember you, or even remember what, you know, they said a moment ago. It can be very uncomfortable. I just want to acknowledge how moving it was to be a part of a group of people that said, no, this person has value. This person is a living, loving, breathing human being who we need to look for in the same way that we would look for a lost child, or lost anybody for that matter. And I would invite us to wonder about this, which is that I think a lot of times, you know, on this journey of losing memory, folks get to a point where they lose themselves. One of the things that jumped out at me, I read the news on Tuesday morning, the announcement of her. I don't know if anybody saw it, but Mary Page. There were two lines that jumped out to me. One was that she doesn't know how to get home, and she probably won't respond to her name. And I wonder what it means to acknowledge that when we don't know ourselves, God still knows us. That there is a knowing that Jesus embodies that is deeper than our memory loss. It's a knowing, an intimate knowing, a desperate seeking, a seeing and acknowledging and understanding, a curiosity about us that is deeper than even the diseases that affect us. And I find, thinking about that, I find that to be an extremely powerful and motivating, uplifting thing, that even beyond my capabilities, that I follow, you know, worship, whatever, you know, however you articulate this. I believe in a God that knows me beyond, you know, the limits of my knowing. And I would invite you to consider that as well. That, you know, the same knowing that Jesus applies to the demoniac, the paralytic, the Samaritan woman, the Syrophoenician woman, the same knowing that he invites his disciples to experience, the same seeing, that applies to us, that applies to you as well. That God seeks to know us even when our comprehension fails. God seeks to know us so deeply and knows us so profoundly, because it is God who in fact has molded us, shaped us into being, and whose breath is our life. All right, I'm getting hoarse. Remember, this is the second time that I preached this, so hopefully it was better the second time through, but we'll never know. All right, folks, grace and peace and blessings to all of you. Again, stay warm through these next couple of days. We'll be back in person, I'm very confident, next Sunday. It's just rain in the forecast, which we can handle. All right, blessings.